Thank you so much. Zadie, do you want to go first? Since
Oh,
you're,
you can go first.
are you sure?
Yeah.
So Zadie and I,
May I just add something?
Dr. Eng, yes.
Both Dr. Bridget Noonan and Dr. Zaidi Mohsen are my one of my besties. They keep me afloat in the profession. And thank you very much for being here.
We're happy
Thank
to
you.
do it.
Yes.
So just so that you know, the three of us have worked together and presented together for a number of years. We've known one another since we all got our PhD around the same time. And so we have been in, as Zaidi has been in AACD, I was in AACD before it became ACA. So the profession of counseling is near and dear to my heart. Some of you asked about talking about our career trajectory. I didn't get my undergraduate degree until I was 27 years old. So I worked at night while getting my undergraduate degree. And I got my master's degree in rehabilitation counseling at the University of Maryland, College Park. I worked as a research psychologist at the National Institutes of Mental Health for a number of years. I applied for PhD programs all over the country. I got into a number of them. And I went out to California, to Palo Alto, and I was in a clinical psych program, and I hated it. I'm not a clinical psychologist, but I loved San Francisco. For those of you who know the Bay Area, it's quite beautiful. So I stayed out there for a number of years. And then I reapplied to PhD programs. I got in again to a number of them, and then I came back to the Maryland area. The Washington, D.C. area is where I was born and raised. My family, all of my family is there. So I got into the University of Maryland, College Park, which at the time and continues to be a very good program in counseling, counselor education. So I got my PhD, and then I went and I took my first tenure track job at the University of Maryland Eastern Shore. For those of you that don't know, UMES is a historically Black college and university. And I was at UMES for 6 years, and I was married at the time. My former spouse and I decided that we wanted a change. And so I applied for a number of positions. And this is where in our objectives, we talked about goodness of fit. So when you apply, for those of you that are interested in applying to institutions of higher education, looking at schools that are teaching institutions versus research institutions is really going to be important for you. And be cognizant of that when you go on your interviews. If the teaching is going to be a 4-4, just know that you are not going to be able to do research. It's going to be very, very, very challenging. So when I went to UMES, it was, I taught a 4-4. So I taught 4 courses in the fall and 4 courses in the spring. And then I also taught 2 courses in the summer. So I was teaching 10 courses a year. There was not an opportunity for me to do research, although I did. I did a lot of service work. That's the other piece of this kind of the 3-legged or 4-legged stool that you need to think about is teaching, scholarly and creative activity, service, and advising. So when you go on your interviews, you need to ask the institution how do they value teaching, how do they value teaching and scholarly work, and how do they value service. For the women in the group, I want you to be very, very careful about taking on too much service activity because many times, and research shows this, women will take on a bulk of the service work and their teaching and scholarly activity will take a back seat. Also for folks from different visible racial ethnic groups here, Similarly, you will be asked to take on tasks because you are from a different visible racial ethnic group that I really want you to be aware of that for yourself. I understand and appreciate the effects of the power differential when you are in a tenure track position. I get it. But good leaders, and in this instance, department chairs and deans will hopefully support faculty when they come into positions, whether it's at a teaching institution or a research institution. So from, I went to Stetson, which is a teaching institution, but they also value scholarship. I was able to hone my administrative and research skills there. I got on a number of committees where I was able to really make a difference. One of the things that I did was I got on a tenure and promotion task force, and we were able to change our tenure and promotion guidelines, which was very important, very interesting to me. I was there for 12 years. I went there as an assistant professor, and I left there as a full professor. I realized that I love to teach. I'm a great teacher, and I'm not saying that to blow sunshine, but I am a good teacher. But I'm also a very good administrator, and I see in higher education that there's not always good administration going on. So there wasn't an opportunity for me to continue my administrative trajectory at Stetson, and I was in the middle of my divorce, so it was a good opportunity for me to leave. I don't have any children, so leaving was easier for me. For those of you with family, you know, that's always something that you're going to have to think about, particularly if you have small children and you don't want to uproot them, or if you have a partner or a spouse that is really kind of honed into your community, you know, that's going to be a challenge for you. So from Stetson, I interviewed for a number of dean's positions, and I was shortlisted on a number of them, and I took the position at NAS. NAS is also a teaching institution, but we're in the process, hopefully, of changing that. I will say that with the impact of COVID, a lot of things have been not left, but we had to shelve some things because of the pandemic. And how, you know, for the last really 5 months now, all I have been doing is supporting my faculty in terms of how they teach. Oregon State is kind of well positioned because it is a distance program, but places like NAS, places that are residential colleges or universities, it has been a challenge. We have a number of faculty that this is not how they see themselves. This is not how they kind of disseminate their discipline. And so I've spent a great deal of my time supporting my faculty on that. Also, how are we going to evaluate our faculty? And now I'm in the midst of thinking about masks and rules and how somebody is going to go into a building and out of the building, and, you know, things of that nature. So we've had to come together as an institution, as a community, to really decide, are we going to be all in, or are we going to be dispersed all about? And NAS made the decision, as I'm sure you all have seen all over the Chronicle inside higher education. NAS is one of the institutions that made a decision to start in person. And so faculty had the choice to start in person, hybrid, or teach virtually. And so we have about 25% of our faculty that are doing in person. About 60% of our faculty are doing a hybrid, and then the rest are doing virtual. We were slated to start August 24th, but we're starting a week early. We are doing what many institutions, as I'm sure you all have seen, are doing in terms of we start August 17th and we go through the Friday before Thanksgiving. And there will then be 4 days of finals, and students will be able to go home right before Thanksgiving. I don't know what's going to happen for the spring semester. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens, but we're beginning to have that discussion. Right now, I'm just kind of focused in on what are we going to do for the fall semester. So that's just kind of my little spiel right now. And I wrote your questions down, but I'll, Zaidi needs to talk.
Okay, good. Thank you. Well, I'm feeling old for some reason. I look around.
We're the same age.
No, but being in the field, I have if you want to bring home something today, take this. You have to be true to yourself, even as a counselor educator. And there's a lot of professional dispositions that we are talking about. And a good example is if you become a faculty, there's a retention committee, there's a remediation and dealing with students, whether we have to decide collectively whether the students fit into the counseling profession, because we are the gatekeepers to the profession. So it's easy to judge other people, but it's also equally important to look inward, whether we are congruent, whether we walk the talk in terms of what gatekeeping is all about. As much as we want to be, we say we are open-minded, but really do our behavior and our character demonstrate that we are open-minded? Are we collaborative, or are we selfish or self-centered, and then that kind of stuff? And that's important. One thing is, in higher education, there's a voting process. For example, your promotion and tenure is being reviewed by your colleagues, and at whatever stages, a colleague in the department, colleague in the college, and colleague at the university level. So really, any one of them can throw a monkey wrench into the spin. So you have to be. I'm not asking you to kind of smooch to get your way through, but if you are congruent and you are true to yourself, it will come forth. But also in anything else, in higher education, documentation is important. So pay attention to the criteria for merit raises, for example. Pay attention to how you can earn promotion and tenure. And negotiation, if you already have several years of teaching someplace else as a post-secondary level, or you do adjunct, there might be some department that might consider that giving you maybe 6 months or a year of credit towards your promotion and tenure at your new place. So those are open. Number two, because of the pandemic, what happened is, especially in public institutions that are relying on enrollment, head counts, they are facing financial difficulties, especially in the states that politicians always talk about how they value education. But when it comes to voting and support and giving resources to education, there was zilch, there was nothing. The budget for higher education has been constantly eroding. And you may want to take a look at those kind of information. How much that particular university that you apply for has reserve. The higher the reserve, the better. If they have very little reserve in their account, they are dependent on living day to day. So today they may be okay, but tomorrow they may not be. So those are the issues that, you know, and then read maybe higher ed newsletter or chronicle, because we chose to be in the field, and that is the setting, that's the place where we're going to earn our living. And what happened in our sister institution may have, may be influencing our own institution. So we are, because homeostasis, because of systemic. So what happened in Oregon, and I could say, oh, didn't happen in Texas. No, it's not, because it might happen to us too. So for example, in when we talk about documentation, and you have to be clear in your mind, how do you evidence, how do you provide evidence of your productivity, of your value into your workplace? What kind of evidence is of value? What kind of evidence is of less value? Bridget alluded to that. For example, in my department now, as a department chair, I'm willing to give a release time to my faculty, a junior faculty, if they come up with a plan. For example, say, Zaidi, give me one class release. So instead of teaching 4, I can only teach 2, 3 or whatever, because I'm doing this. My point is, at the end of evaluation period, how do I see it? The progression, what do you have to show to me that I will continue to support you having less class to teach? So you have to be clear in mind. If you say I have a research project, then 6 months down the road, how does that research project is going to look like from your perspective as a researcher, and from me as your immediate supervisor? How do I look? Can you convince me that you are moving forward or you are stuck? You know, so those are the things that you need. And plus, I also see you in terms of not promotion necessarily, but tenure. I also see you, how you relate yourself with your colleagues. Are you a team player? Are you a rebel rouser? Are you a drama queen? That is, that if I spend a lot of energy on you versus my spending of energy on the rest of my colleague in my department, well, on occasion, I will call you in and say, hey, let's talk about this, and calm down a little bit and that kind of stuff. It's just like a dad, so to speak, and talking that, because we think that if you have the potential, we might want to smoothen the edges, and that's part of mentoring process. And allow yourself to be mentor, be humble, because not just because we have a PhD doesn't mean that we know everything, and our way have to go forth and that stuff. So there's a lot of flexibility in that kind of issues. But also, department chair or a dean, in a roundabout way, has a lot of power over your career, and a lot of rooms to give you incentive, but also has some power to curtail or punish you if thing doesn't work. But you yourself have to be very open and always consult in terms of, am I doing okay? Am I doing this? Because you need to know that. And you don't want to jump from place to place too much too often, from institution to institution, because when we look at your resume, if you shifted from one place to a place, and then because that's disrupt, from my vantage point, that could be disruptive to my student, to my program, especially because you are going to be an advisor. I want some measure of stability for the sake of my student. If you jump from place to place too often, I said, so that is also the criteria. So this kind of forum is good so that you get the hint of what is expected of you. So for example, professional identity is important. So a lot of us identify ourselves with American Counseling Association and that kind of stuff. So if we look at your professional engagement, then we want to know what kind of engagement is that? Is that more into a counseling field or not? But it also take a look at the mission of the university. Bridget alluded to teaching and service and that kind of, and we talk about service. Service doesn't pertain to only service to your department. Service could be outward. Service can be community. For example, you set up, you create a class when you engage students to go outside and do some activity with area school or area stakeholders and that kind of stuff. And as long as it is within the mission of the university and within the mission of the colleges, that will bode very well. As long as your engagement and activity raise the profile of the unit that you come from. The dean love that, the president and the provost and that kind of stuff. So for example, you may want to create a class on now that pandemic, in the pandemic era and that kind of stuff. You want to create something to do with reaching out to area school, talking to seniors. How do they go about deciding whether the college is for them or they want to take a break or what and that kind of stuff. You don't have to do it yourself. You can gather your student, especially if you teach student in career counseling class, and you infuse in your curriculum. And this kind of activity, you need to discuss with your head or your chairperson and that kind of stuff. And this kind of thing both very well with thinking outside of the box in terms of service. What are they and how you quantify them? And at the end of the day, whatever you do, you want those things that you do count towards your promotion and tenure or your merit or your pay increment every year and that kind of stuff. And that's the bottom line, because you want to make yourself professionally healthy. And there are times in doing so, you have to swallow your ego, your personal ego, because you cannot play the game when you are only in charge and you change the rule. Sometimes we have to be followers, and that's what it takes. Of all the people, our curriculum, counselor education curriculum, if you look at KCREP standard and that kind of stuff, we are the one who are kind of an expert in providing crisis intervention. And now in pandemic, we are facing with the crisis. So if the provider themselves are in crisis, how do you expect the client to give you the professional credibility in order to receive counseling if we ourselves so in other words, we already made and not many professions require group counseling, for example, but we do. So the message is we are collaborators, we work well as a group, and that kind of stuff. So how do all this curriculum in our preparation program manifest itself when we are done with our preparation and we graduate, and how do we carry ourselves? So for those who are in higher education days, if you stick to being a professor, instructor, in terms of if that's what you want, is that what your passion is, that's fine. But there are times when you get into the administration for one reason or another, because for me, one of the reasons for being an administrator is I can shape the field, the department, the contribution to the field according to my understanding and my vision. And plus, the money is there. The administrator got paid better than the professors. Let's face it. And then I can decide, and I can give, I can give Jared bonus, for example, and that kind of stuff. Because Jared follow, live walk the talk of a counselor. And I may not want to give to Vanessa, because Vanessa is more, she says she's a counselor, but she's appearing to be more of a psychologist. So so being an administrator, I'm in that position to do that. And plus, I can always go, but I think that your understanding of the world is changing. For example, we talk about the enrollment, how not in counseling, but enrollment in other programs is affecting your your resources in the counseling. Even though in counseling itself is healthy in terms of enrollment, but if other programs are not healthy, it's gonna have a direct impact on you. Number one. And number two, when the faculty collectively say we need this unique or idiosyncratic to counseling, and we make that proposal to the dean or to provost or the president, they have to look at how significant is these differences. If there's a counseling proposal, the counseling thing, how are they significantly different than other programs, and that kind of stuff. So we cannot, I think my point is, yeah, we are unique. For example, in your practicum and internship, I cannot assign, I have to pay attention to FTE ratio. I cannot assign 15 students to an internship. I cannot assign maybe 12 or 6, 6 students. And that's kind of a bottleneck. But it is my job to explain to higher up what limitation I have and what is the bigger goal and that kind of stuff. For example, in counseling at master's level, we require 60 credit hours. In business, MBA require only 30 credit hours. So our student, by the time they graduate, should technically get 2 master's degree. But our student at a master's level only get 1 degree, and they are paid when they graduate. Being a counselor with a master's degree is pitiful, the amount of money that you get every month compared to those who graduate with MBA. That doesn't make sense, and we are lucky if you get good, decent money. So that kind of stuff. So how do we convince the higher up to give students in a counseling program some leeway and greater flexibility relative to students in business, for example, relative to students in nursing, for example, and then that's our job, and it's good experience. Well, that's all. I think Bridget and I are open to any questions that you may ask. Yeah.
I know it was Matt who asked about practicum and internship during COVID, and so really it all depends, everyone, with accrediting bodies, and that's the thing with accreditation, is it's both a blessing and a curse. Mm-hmm. And so KCREP has said that we can do telehealth some, but you can't do telehealth for the entire prac and internship. And so it really depends upon the site. And many sites right now are afraid. They're afraid to bring in interns, whether it's teacher education candidates, whether it's school counseling, mental health counseling, marriage and family. And so your practicum and internship directors, supervisors at the college and university level are working around the clock. I mean, I have a meeting next week with our attorneys to discuss an addendum that I had to write for COVID for all of our students. And so my school, I have speech language pathology. I have creative arts therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy, public health, nursing, and social work. So, you know, I kind of have all of the allied health, and I had to write an addendum for COVID-19 for students to go into an internship. And it's very strict. A lot of the sites don't want to sign it because it puts them at risk. And so, you know, Zaidi said it's going to be really important for you to kind of, as some of you are generalists in counselor education, it's also going to be important for you to kind of throw your net wide in terms of gathering information. So right now, colleges and universities, I'm a huge sports fan. I graduated from a Division I school, and I love D1 sports. But I also know, and I appreciate the fact that athletes right now are really balking at going back, and I don't blame them, right? Because first of all, they're not getting paid, and they're being put into a risky situation. So similarly for our interns, if you are going into a hospital setting or a community health clinic where maybe perhaps people are coming in and out and we're not practicing physical distancing and sanitizing, people are really nervous about that. So, you know, what I would say to you, Matt, is, and this is where my students always got really frustrated with me, it depends. And so it's gonna depend if you're in Maryland, in Oklahoma, in Oregon, in DC, wherever you are, it really is just gonna depend. And so one of the things that you have to ask your advisor, or, you know, for those of you that are beginning your time in terms of directing master students, is, you know, you have to do that work right now, because you may find that there are not going to be sites out there for your students.
One of the characteristic of being an effective counselor is high tolerance for ambiguity, isn't it? So when the time comes right now, I want to be told specifically what exactly must I do, how many pages I have to write. So there goes ambiguity out of the door. So you see, I always come back to the content material in counseling. So a good example is school counseling. But if you were to study KCRAP before on the standard, not the standard, prior to that, in terms of the concept, whenever there's the state regulation and rule conflict with the standard, so where would it be? How it's gonna be resolved? Because actually, here we have to understand the fact that university really a degree is a granting institution. Licensure certification is prerogative of the state. So really, for example, in terms of KCRAP, 100 hours practicum, 600 hours internship, 700 hours. So, but if the state come, well, you don't need 700 hours for school counseling. You only need maybe 200 or 100 hours. So the students say, I don't care about KCRAP. I don't care about it. Just give me a degree, and I already fulfill that whatever the governor say, whatever the state say, and that kind of stuff. And here the challenge for us: can we give a degree with a short of 700 practicum and internship without jeopardizing our own accreditation? And that is where consultation have to come in. We have to really, my understanding of KCRAP is, if we were to draw up the plan and that kind of stuff, because the KCRAP gave us the flexibility until June of 2021 to, you know, because in this pandemic time, so prior to June 2021, we can create a program that to accommodate and to right over the pandemic with all this exception. And following what the state require is carry a big stick, because ultimately for the university is we cannot, number one, we cannot graduate student and the student cannot find employment. That's a no, 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 no. Because the more of our students are a degree, if we graduate or we create a degree program, and those students who graduate from that program cannot find employment, that is in a violation of some of the higher learning commission standard. Oh, by the way, as Jared and I think myself, volunteer yourself when you get a faculty position into doing some kind of reviewing for maybe KCRAP, or if you are in a college education for CAPE, the teacher education, or for me, I'm in also higher learning commission, so that you know the idea of how the program can sustain itself and what the parameters, the limitation of each program, and that knowledge, that skill, that accreditation carry a lot of weight for you in your future job thing. Even as
It
a
also,
doctoral student, even as a doctoral student, volunteer your service to help your faculty write up a self-study for accreditation. That'd be good. Yeah, Bridget.
it also, you know, Adrian talked about a sense of connection. So it also helps you connect with other people in the field. It really is important to find connections. Again, Zaidi Kochman and myself have been connected for over 20 years now. We've presented a number of times together, we've written together, and that's important for us, not just from a professional standpoint, but they're also my friends. And I don't see them in person a lot. The last time I saw them, where the heck were we, guys? We were in Seattle. No, we weren't. We were in, yeah, we were in Seattle. I saw Kochman in Seattle, and Zaidi, I didn't see you. You came in late. But before that, we were at a Oasis convention in Vancouver. Is that where it was? Yeah. I think Vancouver.
Victoria.
And Jared, you were there, and we had dinner, right? The four of us had dinner.
Was that Victoria? Or was that
Vancouver? Was Victoria, you're right. So you can see it really is important for me to have connection. As a white female, part of what I do, you know, so here I have these two men who, and we talk about this a lot in counselor education, is the cultural roles that we all play. And so from a cultural standpoint, and I'm talking about race, I'm talking about gender identity, religion, all of those things. Zaidi alluded to this, the mission of your school and where you decide to end up is going to be important. So for those of you that, wherever you are, if you think you're going to stay there, look at the schools that are around you. In Rochester, I have 19 different colleges and universities that I could choose from. Some are Div 1s, some are Division 3s, some are teaching institutions, some are research institutions. You all have to decide, do I want to write? Do I want to do research? Do I want to teach master's degree only? Do I want to teach master's and doctoral level students? So, you know, Kochman his career has been doing both. And I have been primarily at the master's degree level. I've done some doc, but I also knew very early on that I'm an okay writer. I'm not a great writer. Cookman is a great writer. He's prolific. He mentors students. He also mentored me. And so that was important for me because that helped me when I went up for full professor. When I took a sabbatical, he and I did a research study, and we were able to produce 2 research articles. And so that was really important for me. Zaidi also alluded to finding a mentor. Cookman is my friend, and at one point he was my mentor from a writing perspective, because you have to be incredibly dedicated to write. And I am not. I'm dedicated in many things. I'm not dedicated in writing. I can do it when I have a deadline. And so again, for those of you that are very interested in working at a place like Oregon State or UNLV or things like that, ask the question, what is the requirement for teaching? What is the requirement for research and scholarly activity? And what is the requirement for service? And ask to see the guidelines. I want you, it's going to be very important to find out, okay, what does it mean that I have to teach well? What does that mean? What's the criteria? How am I evaluated on that? Not just that you're being told that you have to teach well. How are you evaluated? Because if they say one thing and then you sign your name and then you come in and find out that it's not what you were told, you're going to be very unhappy. And so it's your job when you all go out on your interviews to find out, how am I evaluated? And what is the evidence of that evaluation? Are there teaching evals? So the student evals, really important, but it's not the be all end all, because what do we know from the research about student evals, right? It's only, if I'm drawing a plot, it's only one piece of the evidence. Am I going to be observed from my peers? How often? Is it once a semester? Is it twice a year? Is it once every 4 years? If there are no peer observations, get somebody to come in and observe you teaching and have them give you constructive feedback. You want to know if you are teaching well. And then from a service perspective, as Zaidi pointed out, it's not just to your department, but for all of you in your first year, I don't want you to do any service work. I want you to learn the mission and the culture of your department. If you're in a school, and of the college or university, you need to know what the culture is. You need to know what is going on. Is the department, how is the department positioned? Are people collegial? Are they collaborative? Or are they all just kind of doing their own little prima donna thing? You all need to find that stuff out, because when you go on your interviews, what do we know about interviews? Everybody puts on their nice little, coat and tie or dress, and everybody looks right and tight, right? Face validity, everybody looks great. But then when you get in there, it may not be so great. So that first year, I need you to, and I do this with all my new incoming folks. Nobody has service work. They all learn what it is to be a teacher. Because if you've been a K-12 teacher, that's fabulous, but it's very, very different being a university professor. Similarly, if you've been an adjunct, wonderful, but it's very, very different moving into a tenure track or a clinical track position. So I want you to learn what that means. And then after your first year, so your first year you can ask questions, observe, talk to people, not just within your department, but also outside of the department. See, find out where other people kind of live and learn and all that kind of stuff. Get out of your office. Don't sit in your office. Walk around campus. Now, for those of you that are going to teach at a distance learning, that's going to be hard to do, but if there's any way that you can do that, do it. And to Zaidi's point, after that, you need to, your service work is related to three things: your department, the school if your department resides in a school, and then at the college or university level. So there are committees within the department, within the school, and then within the college. And then whatever you do outside, to Zaidi's point, if you're going to, I urge all of you at least one time to go on a KCREP, to learn what it is to be a KCREP site team member. It's important. It's important to the field. You learn about people. You learn about what other institutions are doing. You learn, oh, I could do that, or oh, I don't want to do that, or oh, this team member is what? Who are these people? Or this is great. So again, I think that's important. And then I'm a big believer, and Zaidi and Kochman know this, about giving back to the community in which you live. So whether that's volunteering at a soup kitchen, I do pro bono work for a community mental health clinic here, and I run groups and work with trans women of color. So that's really important to me, that in whatever way you can give back to your community. And that's how, you know, I'll circle back to Adrian's question about connection. It's really important that you find a sense of connection. How you take care of yourself is a sense of connection. In these 5 months of being in a pandemic, if somebody tells me that things have been great the whole time, I'm going to call you a big fat fibber, because, you know, it hasn't been great these whole 5 months. I'm sure one day you've had a sucko day. You know, I've had just a couple of days where it's just like, oh my word. So how you take care of yourself is really important. I'm a big believer in looking at the holistic person. So how you take care of yourself is really important. And I'll kind of stop there.
Mm-hmm. To add to what Bridget just stated, for example, if you're talking about artifact or portfolio for your promotion and tenure, and you have to really understand the value of each item. A good example is, how is the criteria for promotion and tenure value students' evaluation of your teaching, for example? How heavy is it? Because then it's very touchy, because when we talk about validity and reliability of all those kind of items, it's very judgmental. So in other words, if you are happy-go-lucky and give everybody an A, of course you're gonna get a high student evaluation. But really, so where does student evaluation fit into the schema of things? So you have to understand that kind of stuff. So, but for me, I don't place student evaluation that high in but I place people like, I think my understanding of Jared is, when he first joined a university as a faculty, lo and behold, he was tasked about writing a self-study, and that dictates the survival, the entire program. Here comes Jared, a fresh from a doctoral school.
Seven years later, still writing it. 8 years later, still writing.
And all of a sudden, in charge of a self-study. And the good thing is he survived. But the roller coaster that he has to go through, that is mind-boggling. But in a way, he was put in the pressure cooker for several years and that kind of stuff. But be prepared for that, because sometimes that's how the game is played. Push it to the junior, push it to new people, and that kind of stuff. I as an administrator, I do not like click among my faculty. No, but I would rather have a face-to-face, and I value transparency. Say, for example, if your personal life is having a rough moment at the point in time, You know, there's nothing wrong with you going to see your chair and talk it out. In other words, right now I'm having this blah 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 blah, and that kind of, because your mental health and your ability to sustain your productivity as far as the work is concerned is more important. So if you cannot take care of yourself, then you cannot take care of your professional life too. So you have to balance. But you know, somebody within the system have to know, and not just know, but also act as your advocates to the higher up. You know, I took it upon myself to even go and talk to the dean about issues that my faculty are doing, or even go to the HR, human, you know, recruitment office, find the way how we can accommodate a certain situation, and that kind of, because I take it my job to advocate for my faculty in my program, and that kind of, so that require transparency from the ground up. You know, what are the issues, or whether it's worth pursuing it, and that come across quite a bit. I think, yeah.
So I'm looking at the comments from Kochman and Jared, and I agree with everything that is being said. So for the women and the faculty of color, it's true. You have to work harder. You all have heard about Professor Paul Harris at the University of Virginia. Have you all heard about him? So there is a professor of counselor education at the University of Virginia, and he went up for tenure and promotion. You usually go up in your 6th year. And so he went up last fall for tenure and promotion. He got through, so that, and forgive me if I'm repeating things here or just being repetitive. So usually what happens, this isn't the case in all institutions, but your department will have faculty who are senior faculty members who are tenure and promoted, who will review your dossier and will kind of vote it through, or they will not vote it through. I never, ever want a faculty member who is in their 6th year to go up for tenure and promotion and be unsuccessful. As a department chair, I never wanted that to happen. It never did. And as a dean, I don't want it to happen. And so that's where you have to have, and again, I want you to find this out when you go up, when you go for positions. When are you evaluated in the tenure and promotion system? Is it in your 2nd year? Is it in your 4th year? Or do you just go up in your 6th year and you find out? You want to be successful. And so this gentleman went up and he was denied tenure. He fought it. He's a black man. He fought it, and he recently won. And so they reversed the decision, and he's now, he received tenure and promotion. But to Kochman's point, women and folks of color have to work harder than white men. And so I tell the story. When I started out as a tenure track faculty member, my starting salary was, hold on to your seat, it was a lot of money. It was $35,000. And you know, you all are thinking, what? $35,000? That's why you went to school? And I found out that a gentleman, he was hired the same year as I was. We had exactly the same PhD. His was just from a different institution, but it was a R1 KCREP accredited program. And I found out that he was making $25,000 more than I was. And I went to my dean and I said, this is patently unfair. and I want you to give me a raise. And she said, I can't do that, Bridget. And I said, yes, you can. You can at least give me more money. And she said, no, I can't. And that was kind of the start of my leaving that institution. And so know that at public institutions, salary is known. So when you work at a public institution, the salaries of your colleagues, that's for public record. But when you work at a private institution, you're not going to know the salaries of your colleagues. Do your homework when you go and look for a position. There is information out there that you can look at the salaries at public institutions, private institutions, as well as religious institutions. If you need that information, I'm happy to provide it. But I really want you to do your homework. It's important, because I never want a faculty member to get into a place where they're like, what? You make what? Now, to Zaidi's point, you're going to be working where you might have a business faculty member, and business faculty members are always going to make more than people in education or people in the social sciences or the humanities. People that, if you're going to go to a school where there's a medical school or a law school, those people are going to make more money. So again, it's going to be important for you all to do your homework and find out if there is an Office of Diversity and Inclusion. Now they're primarily, at most institutions there is, but from an organizational standpoint, I want you to find out where it's located. So when you look at an org chart, and you have the president, and then you have the provost. So the provost, you all know, is the chief academic officer, and then under the provost are the deans, right? So my role, and Zaidi can talk about this too, my role as a dean, I'm the chief academic officer for my school. And you want a diversity and inclusion person to be at the vice presidential level, if at all possible, because then they can really manage and develop protocol, guidelines, processes for D&I work. If you have a D&I office that's kind of located down here at the bottom of the org chart, D&I work may not mean as much as the institution says it does. So again, it's going to be, if diversity, and I would hope that diversity and inclusion is important to all of you, find out from an organizational standpoint where it resides in the institution. Really, really, I can't stress that enough. One of the things that I love about NAS is that my president, who just he just retired, he made it a VP level position. And so instead of it being a director kind of thing. So again, really important that you find that out. If and hopefully it is important to you all.
Well, what a wealth of information here. I can see that time is flowing really fast, and we only have 10 minutes to go. We have some questions in the chat, and then I also want people to just go ahead and speak up if you have burning questions. So in the chat, we have 3 questions. And
so Olivia has a question about committee assignments in the first few years and how do department chairs, deans via adjunct experience. Say more about that, Olivia. What do you mean?
So the first question about committee work, Dr. Noyan, you had mentioned that in your first few years, it's good to start kind of looking at committees and being part of committees. So I have found so I have a tenured position at a community college here in San Diego. And in my first few years, I was assigned the committees that nobody wanted, which now are really great committees. And now counselors want to be on the committees that now I'm currently on. So how do you, as a first year, second year, hopefully tenure track person, kind of navigate that, being assigned to committees that nobody else wants? And then the adjunct, both of you had mentioned just having experience and then kind of understanding the adjunct flow versus the full-time flow. So I just wanted, out of curiosity, I'm thinking about maybe becoming an adjunct at a four-year university here in San Diego, because I already have a full-time tenured position, but I want to make my way up into a university. So how does that adjunct look? Should I not do adjunct because I already have higher ed experience? What does that look like?
So go ahead, Zaidi.
Adjuncts, I think, be more versatile in terms of content, course content. So in other words, for example, don't just teach research, for example. You need to teach a variety of other courses. So in other words, you can teach assessment, you can teach group, you can teach career, you can teach theory, you can teach all pedagogical courses, but also you can teach skill classes. For example, you can be instructor of record for practicum or internship of counseling skill and that kind of stuff. The more versatile you are, because you want to list all those courses that at a four-year institution that you have taught on your resume for future career. So the more versatile you are, the better. If you are just narrow to the, for example, and narrow that's in terms of content, but also I would prefer somebody who is also versatile in terms of levels. I just don't want individual just to be able to teach just masters, cannot teach doctoral. I want to be able to hire somebody who have the capability and ability to teach a doctoral, masters, or even undergraduate at a higher level, undergraduate, if needs be. So and because that's the what my department needs.
And this also goes into Jody's question about a private versus a public institution. So Olivia, if you're looking at a school in San Diego that has a doc program, that's different than other schools in San Diego that are master's degree only. So to Zaidi's point, you have to kind of not necessarily decide, but think about the impact that you want to have on students, whether that is master's level student or doctoral level students or both. And so to Zaidi's point, when I look at a CV for a faculty member, whether it's an adjunct, and so adjuncts usually don't come up to the dean level. They primarily reside in the department chair. So that really is going to depend upon what the department is looking for in terms of teaching. Sometimes, and this goes back to Olivia's point about committees. Sometimes, you're going to get caught with the crap class in whatever, right? But sometimes it's because, a faculty member has gotten ill or whatever, and you're able to take on a good course. But I agree with Zaidi that you need to be as versatile and generalist as possible in taking on adjunct work. From the public versus private institution, that's where you all just have to do your homework in terms of your public institutions are really more insular. They don't rely on public funding as much as public institutions do. When I worked at a public institution, I had to deal with the state legislature a lot. I had to go to the state, I had to, lobby, whereas at private institutions, you don't have to do that as much. Now, with that being said, private institutions are more so than public institutions enrollment driven. And if we don't make our enrollment, we're going down, right? So Zaidi pointed this out at the start of this, that public institutions now are they're focusing their attention on enrollment, but I would say private institutions have done that always, just because you have to look at kids that are paying full price versus kids that are getting a tuition discount. You know, that's the other thing. You know, I could talk about this all day, but if you're at a school that is granting a 60% tuition discount, just think about that from a math perspective. And you have 80% of students that are paying tuition discount of 60%, you're not bringing in a lot of money. So institutions are private institutions are always looking at that, and that's what you all have to kind of think about.
Yeah, but also, yeah, in terms of, you know, go back to one of the things that counselor education preparation programs encourage us to do is to do self-reflection, to go deep inside of us and ask us questions. So in terms of assignment, in terms of committee assignment or course assignment, teaching assignment and that kind of stuff, I always ask myself, and am I being a token here for something? And because if I discover the answer is I'm a token, that reduces me and I don't feel good about it. So I make a point I mean, I'm not a rebel rouser. I'm not fighting to your face kind of stuff. But as soon as I feel like in terms of social justice, I said, things are not being fair, I'm not shy about raising it as an issue. For example, you know, and that kind of, why do I always end up on this kind of assignment? Why do I always end up teaching these classes? Why can't I do something like that? Well, in flexibility. And sometimes when you raise that question, they don't play a fool with you, because you know you are not arrogant, but you are assertive. You are taking care of yourself, and we are free to ask questions. You can say things like, you know, I feel like several semesters now I've been assigned this, you know, that kind of stuff, and you know, because there are, you know, in terms of social justice, the oppressor is always oblivious to the way of oppression, and they can say, "Is this a joke? You know, why are you consider that harassment or that kind of stuff?" Only the oppressed are sensitive. We pick up cues right away. So, but we cannot articulate that. For some reason, we just feel it, and sometimes, and then because we challenge the white privilege kind of thing, you know, and then we don't want to make a flicker become a fire. We don't want to become, we don't want to create a revolution within the department or anything like
Or
that.
sometimes we do. I'll step in here and say sometimes we do.
Yeah, but my point is this: we have to advocate for ourselves.
Sure.
And do it professionally, do it nicely. So, and there are times when I feel like, for example, I've been to a meeting. I'm the only non-white person there, for example. I feel like, wait a minute, you know, that kind of stuff. So, in other words, when it comes to questions, you know, everybody else's questions was responded, but when my issue was ignored and that kind of stuff, you pick this kind of stuff. But it's a good learning experience. In other words, you know, you can be assertive in a gentle way, and you can. There are times when I you know, use metaphor a lot and use reframing when you confront the big honcho at the university, when you feel like you are being a token, you know, and use humor, and but the message across is still there. That's one point. Another two, this is something that is not quite typical of counselor education. Try to learn how to raise money, regardless whether you are in public institution or private institution.
Doesn't matter.
You know, it doesn't matter. Grant, or even, you know, if you can get hold of somebody who are interested in creating endowed professorship and that kind of stuff. Learn the trick. Learn how to get money to your program and to, because you get money on your account, that will be a huge acknowledgement, especially in these days.
If you all ever want to run anything by me or Zaidi, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Yes.
Yun has our contact information.
Yes, yes.
If you want to call us or email us,
Yeah.
just please reach out. I want you all to be successful. It's important to me that you're successful.
Yeah, it's a very novel
great field.
field, because we are helping not just the client, but we also are helping the future professional who gonna serve the client.
Yep.